So, just a quick heads up for y'all. The original goal with this entire run of episodes for Are You Afraid of the Dark was that I was supposed to only pick about 5 to 10 for us to talk about, in large part because this was part of our recording for the first time back from our little vacation. And so the goal was to not completely overwhelm us, but I got excited. I couldn't really narrow it down very well. And so I wound up talking about every single episode that I had on my list, that being a total of about 30. So, hence the reason why this is being broken up into parts, because that is too much to really just put an entire episode up. Otherwise, the episode would be something like 3.5, 4 hours long. And that's not fun for anybody. I just want to give you guys a heads up for this. My ability to articulate anything when I'm trying to explain my thoughts on something is already not the best to begin with. Either I get very rambly or I just forget what it is I'm talking about. It was honestly kind of worse for this run episode. As a result, I might interject with just a little bit of something like this, like what I'm doing right now, just to really hopefully get across a little better what it was I was trying to explain as I was talking about these episodes. Ultimately, my goal with all of this is just for y'all to have a good time. My ultimate goal with this entire run of episodes for Are You Afraid of the Dark was really to encourage y'all to go and watch these episodes, especially if either A, you hadn't seen them in a long time, or B, you've just never seen them at all. I'd like to think that my inability to explain these episodes well kind of works in your favor, because I'm not giving you all the information. Hopefully you all enjoy it all the same. I think this will be a lot of fun. I just don't really have any better way of saying it without getting a little too talky. Enjoy our little rant of nonsense, because it's a mess.
Happy Halloween to you and your mother.
And your father, I suppose. Sure, why not?
Yeah, I guess we can add him too, even though he didn't do any of the work.
Oh, that's funny. All right, well, welcome back to Animated Chaos. We're crazy.
Most days it's just you, because I'm chill. I'm chill.
Lies.
I'm not speaking slander. What is that? I'm not going to listen to the slander. Continue.
All lies. I'm Kyle.
I'm trying.
So she says. She might be lying.
Oh, that joke is so old. I say it all the time. Hi, I'm Shy. Are you really? Like,
I wasn't going there with that joke. No, we were going a different route.
Really? That's the way I went.
Well, sure. Why not?
Anyway, let's go.
Whatever. We're talking about Are You Afraid of the Dark? No, it's not an original concept by any stretch of the imagination, but who cares, because we love it.
It's a pretty good show. I haven't watched it in years, though.
And I just recently rewatched it because guess what? They've got their own official YouTube channel.
So you can watch how many episodes? Or seasons?
All of the first 7 seasons.
How many seasons are there to go altogether?
Total of 10.
Okay, so you only can't watch the last 3.
Which were from the most recent revival, which are for those 3 seasons. Those are, one season does only have 3 episodes. For those 3 seasons, they're an overarching story altogether, whereas for these first 7 seasons, it's an anthology horror children's series and all that, and it's good.
So wait,
it's very good.
So wait a minute. The point of Are You Afraid of the Dark was the fact that every episode, unless it was a long one, they had to do a 2-parter, was its own individual thing. You talking about these last 3 seasons? They tried to make it this one big concept, like this one big story.
Each season was its own story, so there's 3 different stories going on,
but it's stretched out for every episode.
Yes. So, one season, like season 8, only had 3 episodes, so it was a 3-parter.
Mm-hmm.
Then I think season 9 was like a 6-parter. And then season 10 was a 4-parter. So they're not crazy long.
No, but did they do that in a way to get the entire, so they could do longer stories?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it was just all about doing individual long story form, which I recall seeing at least season 8 at some point, because I think for a little while I did have Paramount, but not anymore because I'm trying to not to spend too much money on streaming services. But
I could have sworn, like I said, it's been a long time since I watched it. I could have sworn there were some episodes that were 2-parters that you didn't need to make an entire season just for one story.
Yes, there in the original series they did have 2 different stories. One was a 2-parter. That was the start of season 4 or 5. 4. That was start of season 4.
Okay.
And that was a 2-parter. And then at the tail end of season 7 for the finale, it was a 3-parter.
Yeah. So like it's not like it's a new concept. Why did they just, because here's my thing with shows. If I'm excited for a new season to come out and that's all you hit me with is 3 episodes of the same story and not enough.
I think the whole reason why they did it like that for those last 3 seasons was because they weren't really all that sure that it was going to hit the same for a modern audience as it did 20 years prior. Which, I don't know, that's a wishy-washy sort of thought process, but that's par for the course in the modern day, let's be honest.
Well, yeah, but at the same time, when I first saw that there was a reboot for Are You Afraid of the Dark, I was like, oh, great, something. I didn't watch it, obviously, but I was like, oh, cool, they're bringing that back. And that was just my thought on it. But if you're wanting something to actually, I don't know, last or in hopes that it would catch on, you would not just limit it to just the 3 episodes for that season. Like, all right, see you in the next season. What? That was it?
Right.
Because then for me, because I'm more of a visual, if something's really, it was good in its time. The pixelation and like the haziness is not as sharp. Most people are not going to go back to season 1 to watch what the other seasons were like, which was individual stories for every episode. So some people are not going to do that. They're going to think that that was the premise of Are You Afraid of the Dark in general, is just one long story told over a course of
13 episodes.
Over a course of maybe 2 thrown in there, depending on if it's 13 episodes. But that's all they're going to think of if they don't go back and actually look at the original, which shows that each one had its own own
story, own telling. And I mean, It was all set up where all these kids were sitting around a campfire, and it was originally billed as all these kids not really knowing each other. They all just kind of met each other at some point, all got along in the sense that they all had that one thing in common of loving to tell scary stories. And so they made a group.
Wasn't it camp or something they met?
No. This was just out in the woods somewhere. There was no camp situation for them in any way. No.
It's been a minute since I watched, so I don't remember how they all got together. I just thought they randomly met at some type of camp function and realized they like scary stories, and then that's what kind of.
I mean, that would certainly make for some logical setup, but they didn't really bill it as that. They were just literally at the very start. It was,
here we are.
We're all different kids. We all go to different schools. We all live in ever so slightly different areas, but we're fairly close by. And we all met at some point and convened together in this location. And then a whole bunch of parents eventually did complain about the whole thing. A bunch of strangers, even though they're teenagers,
they're kids,
getting together to go out to the woods, which I guess I can see some issue with that.
People still do it to this day.
Yeah, but they weren't doing anything wrong. It's just, and here's the thing. It's told later on that this is a thing that has occurred many times in the past. Like, this is a reforming of this little group.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is the newest generation at the time of this series being filmed and whatnot. But as the finale of the entire series at the time, it was originally billed, if you will, as being the next generation after, like, their grandparents had come together for that very exact same sort of thing.
Which,
was really cool.
That's what I'm saying. Like, it sounds cool because, like, they're random, but not, because you find out, like, they are connected in some type of way, especially with the powder. They never explain where they got the bag of salt from. It's not salt. I know what it is.
I'm not sure what it is. Isn't it just like some...
Yeah, it was like, then they would throw it in the fire, it changed color or something.
Flash powder or something.
Yeah, like, who randomly brought that? It was already there. So someone had to have started it. So it's basically just the next generation going on for their love of telling scary stories.
Yeah. And honestly, because of that whole complaint, what would happen is over the course of those first 5 seasons, which was the first setup originally before it got canceled and then brought back 3 years later for 2 more seasons, what had happened is there were several kids who would leave just because they moved away is what was always the excuse, which is a solid excuse for a kid, really. It was really the case of an actor deciding, okay, well, I think it's time for me to move on and go do other projects and the like. And so they just always said this character, these two characters, because there was a case at the start of season 3 or 4 where 2 characters had left at the same time. They had both moved away. All of the kids had gradually moved away, except for a kid after season 1 who just disappeared entirely and they never said anything for a while. He just stopped showing up. I guess they decided that having a group of 5 was better than having a group of 6 or something like that. Or maybe having a group of 6 was better than having a group of 7. Maybe they just felt like it was too many. So they just shrunk it down by 1, just got rid of a kid's character altogether.
That kind of sucks, especially if they didn't want that. But
yeah,
kind of sucks. But
I love this series so much. It's so good. It's so good. Like, honestly, here's the thing. You can absolutely tell that there was just a real love for what they were doing. And in all due fairness, this series purely came about because of the popularity of the Goosebumps books. Let's not even kid ourselves. Like, the Goosebumps books had started first. This series came around in 93. And then Goosebumps got its own series, which was good, around 96 or so. 95, 96, something like that. After seeing the popularity of Are You Afraid of the Dark really taking off as a series, because I guess they didn't think it would take off all that well outside of a book type of thing. I don't know. Makes total sense why it would take off, but...
Yeah, because now what I've read is visually in my face.
Yeah, although Goosebumps was always very hit and miss, though, in all due fairness, so was Are You Afraid of the Dark, when you really take a look at it. Like, Goosebumps had some real banger stories, for sure. But it was always based off of the books. And so if the book was not a banger, neither was the episode. And there were some real stinkers in the Goosebumps books.
Well, I would still say with Goosebumps, though, is at least they stuck to it. So even if it was trash, it translated that it was trash, as opposed to them just trying to randomly
fix it, make it better,
throw something in there. Right now, granted, some people might argue like they could have done that, but
then you would have the people complaining, well, why didn't they keep it original to the book? Well, because this is better. Yeah. Because they fixed it to make it not suck.
Yeah, like at the time this sounded good, but now we can find a way to change it. So I get both sides of it.
Yeah. But. Well, with Are You Afraid of the Dark, it was all wholly original. That was the thing. Like, it wasn't based off of anything. There's no Are You Afraid of the Dark books that they base these stories off of. This was just, we're trying something. We don't know if it's going to take off. It took off. And the rest would be history for almost 10 years. Like, it, aside from the 3-year gap between when it ended and when it would start back up. Yeah, I think it was 3 years. Yeah, it was 3 years between 96 and 99. Beside the 3-year gap there between first iteration and second iteration, which they were smart about. When it came to that second iteration, they had the younger brother of the brother who was originally running it come back and now be the one running it.
Oh, that's cool.
It was a direct run through.
That's cool.
So they were so smart about it. And then the older brother did come back for the finale.
Okay.
So they didn't just completely abandon everything that was there. They were just like, all right, after these first 5 seasons, it got canceled. I guess because parents were complaining about it being too scary, which some of these episodes are. Even now, some of these episodes are scary.
Well, here's my thing is, it's called Are You Afraid of the Dark? And it's a bunch of kids around a campfire telling ghost stories. What did you expect it to be about? Fairies and goblins, which, again, you can turn some of them fairies.
Yeah, a couple of them.
So, I was about to say, some of them fairies was actually devious. But, I mean, my thing is, like, what did sunshine and rainbows around a campfire at night time?
At night.
That's what I thought we were going to talk about. It's too scary. Then don't tell your kid to watch it. I don't know what to tell you. It's the same thing as if you were going to a friend's house and you were telling ghost stories. Don't listen. Leave the room. That's what we did.
I mean, this series, quite literally, even when it was coming out, they literally had to do like a...
age restriction?
Well, I don't want to say an age restriction, but they had to do like a warning up front there. It's like, hey, just so you know, this series can actually be scary. If your kids get scared by this, don't let them watch it. They literally had to put that out there on Nickelodeon. So, a disclaimer. They had a disclaimer.
Because for stuff like that, this is too scary. We told you.
We literally told you there's a disclaimer. I mean, they didn't have a disclaimer at the beginning of every episode. They just had a general disclaimer.
Yeah,
that
like
they
this
had to release.
That like this is not for all children.
Like if your kid is too young to handle scary stuff, don't let them watch it. And even if your teenager is not a fan of scary stuff, they probably shouldn't be watching this. This was definitely billed more towards like teenagers, really.
But but again though, it's like by you telling, oh, it's too scary. Without the disclaimer alone, just the setting should tell you that this isn't for people that can't take scary stuff. Like, I get the disclaimer one was to save themselves too for lawsuits and stuff. But it's one of those like the setting alone should tell you that it's not meant for little kids watching My Little Pony or some mess. Okay, so which I liked it because like I said, I like the Goosebumps books, and so when I watched that, I got into it because it reminded me of the Goosebumps. Even though these were original stories, it was more relatable, I think, to me. Oh, because it's just kids telling a story.
Yeah. Honestly, I did avoid it when I was younger because I was a scaredy cat kid. And I will wholly admit to that. I was a scaredy cat kid. It's only been as I've gotten older that I'm just like, okay. But even still, some of these episodes.
Oh, yeah, no, I'll be watching.
There's a couple episodes in here we're definitely talking about here in a little bit that I'm just like, there's no wonder why that scared the ever-loving crap out of everybody.
Which episode is that?
Oh, we'll get to that one. We're going to kind of run down in order because I've got seasons 1 through 5 that I have just recently rewatched. And the incredible thing about Are You Afraid of the Dark as a collective whole is, aside from season 1, which good on it for being the weakest season out of the bunch, really, because it only means they only got better as it went on. About half of every single season was just a knockout of an episode for one reason or another. And then the other half, okay, they phoned that in. Why is that bad? So,
but again, it keeps it more realistic because not every ghost story you tell is a good one.
Well, that, and also these stories are all written to be as though they were actually written by these children telling these stories. So some details are glossed over. Some things are just kind of conveniently happening. But at the same time, you can tell when there's something really being fleshed out there and you're just like, there is something here, and I wish you'd have just a little bit more time than just the 23 minutes you got to tell this whole story, because there are definitely sometimes, especially as we got into the back end of the series, seasons 4 and 5, where they were definitely telling stories that deserve to be at least 2-parters to really flesh everything out, but were constrained by their time frame, so they did the best they could to give you something that told a cohesive story start to finish within the time frame that they had. And they did a great job. So there are some episodes that are solid that definitely could have been fleshed out and made amazing, but are great for what they did. But then you have a lot of the stories where they just worked so well within their 20-minute time constraints that if you did flesh it out any further, it'd been too much.
Yeah.
So they told all the information they needed to within a tight 20-something minute time frame, and it was great, and it worked, and no one's complaining.
No.
So,
well, fair for you.
Oh, no. These are going to be all about praising certain episodes. This is all just the best episodes of the bunch.
In his opinion.
I got 2 pages worth. I mean, if you want to look these up as you go, I highly recommend it, because there's a couple here that I don't actually remember all the details from, so I would say look up a couple of them.
Okay.
But, like, I will be able to remember enough information from the vast majority of these, and we're not going to talk about every single one of them because I've got 2 pages, and like I said, about half of every season was what I considered something amazing for one reason or another, be it for acting, for storytelling, for atmosphere, all of the above.
Okay.
There were some cases where the story was great, but then the acting brought it so far down that it was just like, that could have been amazing, but it became corny. I'll let you know.
It's PG.
No, okay. We're PG-13 at best. We're not even going to try to hide this. What are we talking about here?
Okay. Just start while I look at this up.
Okie dokie. So I'm just going to start with, actually, it was the penultimate episode of season 1, so it was episode 12 of a 13-episode season. It's called The Tale of the Prom Queen. And what was so incredible about this particular episode is that it had just enough of a scare factor to it but also was really good at bringing out emotion. It was about a couple of guys who were hanging out in a graveyard, as you would as a teenager in the 90s, I guess. And they meet this girl there who's visiting a gravestone of a long lost lover or something or whatever. I don't remember exactly all the details, and I won't remember all the details, so don't sit there and get mad at me about it because I'm not going to remember all the details. And she decides to join them when they ask her if she wants to go get something to eat with them. She does, and then they do a little bit of research. She brings up while they're there in the graveyard about this guy who was supposed to come for a girl on prom night and never shows up. They were supposed to meet at the graveyard for whatever reason. I guess he didn't know was what happened is he didn't know. And he wound up like swerving at some point on his travels and crashed into a lake and drowned. So he dies. And she's wandering this graveyard waiting for him to show up, not knowing that he had died at this point, mind you.
Wait, you said he don't know. He didn't know he was supposed to pick her up at a graveyard?
Yeah, I guess they didn't exactly fully plan out where they were supposed to meet at. Maybe it was supposed to be outside the graveyard. She was inside the graveyard. Okay. So it was supposed to be at the graveyard, but the wrong part of the graveyard, perhaps.
Okay.
Maybe the north, but she was at the south, something like that. It didn't matter that exact detail. Point is, they missed each other. And so whether it was by a case of one of them thinking that the other stood each other up, like they both thought they stood each other up, and he was upset, wound up crashing, wound up falling into a lake car first and drowning. And she thinks he's abandoned her, completely stood her up. She goes off. I don't know if she died or if she just died of a broken heart, which is a very good possibility, honestly. The point being, they're both dead.
Okay.
And she's telling these boys about this story. And because these boys are just trying to impress her, like they all went to the library, they all did a little bit of research, found out what had happened, then go to the graveyard where his gravestone is. They do a seance. They try to pass this information along to him. He does hear this information, like they get chased out of the graveyard by some gravekeepers or something like that. Then they return later that night, go out to the lake where he drowned. They repeat this, let him know all this information. He rises up out of the lake with his car and goes out. And then the next night thereafter, they go to meet at the girl's grave site in order to be able to basically fill everything out and finish all those.
Basically, so they can finally meet.
Yes. Lo and behold, the girl that they had brought out of the graveyard was the prom queen. And she could not leave the graveyard unless someone brought her with them. So
when they invited her to go eat, that's when she could leave.
Yes. And that's when they did all this research, found out all this information. So everything cycles back around very nicely. I'm not explaining it very well. Truth be told, I'm not explaining it very well because this was season 1 and I've watched 5 seasons and it's been a solid week. So.
And my thing is, telling it all, no one's going to want to watch it. So...
no, people are going to want to watch this. People are going to want to watch this.
I'm not speaking like for some people, some like me personally. If you told me from the point A to point Z, the story, I'm not going to watch it. So by you skipping around, it gives me enough points to still go and watch it myself.
Yeah. And that's good because I don't remember everything. But the point being is that they build the emotional aspect of it up so nicely. They build it up so beautifully that by the end of the episode, you are actually kind of at least somewhat in tears because it's so beautifully well executed. They told the story, and that's something that Are You Afraid of the Dark actually did really well with a lot of its stories. When it got about love and when it got about emotion, it could actually develop some really solid emotion. We'll see that in another episode here in the near future that we're going to definitely talk about. And it's impressive. It's really impressive. In a matter of 23 minutes, let's say 23 minutes, it's a good solid amount of time, they managed to tell this story that actually conveys a beautiful emotion. You get to see a beautiful end. And by the end of it, they're together and they go driving off in his car, happy as can be. Everything has been concluded in a beautiful way. And then the boys are just left standing there in the graveyard like, what just happened?
Well, with that thought process, she clearly died the same night.
She did. I believe so.
Because if she couldn't leave the graveyard and she didn't know that he died, that meant she died the same night.
If not the same night, within a couple of days of each other, something like that. I don't remember exactly everything, but beautiful episode. Wonderful episode that honestly would have made for a better season finisher than the actual season finisher. Because I don't even have it listed here. That's how much I don't remember the season finisher of season 1. And just real quick, let's get this out of the way. Season 1, episode 1, The Phantom Cab. It is an episode where the story is good.
Mm-hmm.
The acting, atrocious for half of the characters within the story. The way they have it all set up for the entire series is you've got this group of characters meeting around the campfire, all telling these stories, and then all these characters that we're talking about that are going to be the main focus of all of this are the ones within the story being told. That's where the vast majority of the acting is taking place, so therefore that's what we're going to focus on. Not so much on the ones around the campfire, because their acting earlier on, not fantastic, got better with time. But they never were involved directly in most of these stories, except for the very finale point of season 7, which I only have up to season 5 right now on here. We can always talk about season 6 and 7 and so forth later on. And it was a very solid episode. As far as the story goes for Phantom Cab, very solid.
Mm-hmm.
But the acting. The thing about season 1, episode 1, The Phantom Cab, is it was also the introduction to one of 2 of its consistent reoccurring characters, that being Dr. Vink, who was a mad scientist type of character.
Mm-hmm.
His actor, phenomenal. So he always brings his best work. It's really fun. Any episode that Dr. Vink appears in, it's a fun episode, even if it's not a fantastic episode. The same thing with another recurring character, Sardo, which you do have to pronounce it as such. Sardo, no Mr. accent on the dough. It's specifically how he says his name is to be pronounced.
Okay.
And he will repeat this every time because all the characters will always call him Mr. Sardo.
He don't want the Mr.
He don't want the Mr. No Mr. accent on the dough. Sardo.
Accent on the dough.
Yes. They are recurring characters. They will appear at least once a season. And we will see in a future episode for that 2-parter that they actually come together in a story for the very first time. But that will come later on. We'll talk about that later on. It's a great introductory episode for the series, but the kids acting, you can tell that I think they definitely went with kids who were part of, like, children of the production team or something like that. Like, these were not actors because they couldn't act to save their lives. It was atrocious. Meanwhile, you've got the 2 adult actors in the story and they both do a solid job. So half the actors do great, the other half terrible. And so the good acting is great, but the bad acting brings the episode down. As far as being an opener for the entire series, it's solid.
At least they only used them for that one time?
Yeah. It was very rare that a kid would appear in another story in the future. But it did happen periodically. You just probably wouldn't be able to tell because, honestly, who's going to remember half these kids anyway, right?
Yeah, unless they're showing up more often.
Yeah, but they didn't
Or if they're memorable.
Yeah, but aside from Sardo and Dr. Vink, these characters really don't see a repeat appearance. It doesn't happen to the same kids over and over and over again. So always new kids all the time. And so therefore you've got a variety of different kid actors. Some were really solid, some not so solid, some terrible. It was always a hit and miss.
You also have to put into account, though, some of them was probably their first time acting. So it's probably their first show.
So you got a wide variety there to choose from. Okay, this is an episode where I've done enough research to know that this one never appears very highly on people's radars. And I think it deserves to be on people's radars a bit more than it is. It's called The Tale of the Hungry Hounds. And it's very simply about a girl who gets possessed by her deceased aunt, who died because she forgot to feed the hounds, and these hunting hounds, mind you, these were hunting hounds. And because she forgot to feed them, when they were released, they just went chasing after everything for food, whatever. And I guess she got killed by these hunting hounds. Well, so did the groundskeeper. And so it's billed as the groundskeeper being this bad guy when he's not. He's just angry that she never fed the dogs.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of the very rare few episodes where possession takes place. This doesn't actually happen very often, where possession is a common thing. Surprisingly, you would think possession would be a common theme amongst ghost stories, but no. It's a good episode for both its acting and its setup, its atmosphere. It does a really good job with its atmosphere. It uses fog to its advantage in order to really tell this really creepy sort of story, even though the overarching story itself isn't really all that creepy. So it's an episode where I praise it for its atmosphere, and it deserves to be looked at better than it really is.
So it ends with what? The groundskeeper just saying it's your aunt's fault?
No, because ultimately, with the girl being possessed, the deceased aunt who's possessed her does finally go to undo this damage by spilling out that dog food, releasing the dogs, giving them their food so that they can do. So it's one of those rare cases where it's almost a jumping back in time story as well, in a way, in order to undo the damage. And because the damage was undone, events that were holding the characters back at the start of the episode were no longer present, so it was no longer an issue.
Okay.
So it rounds itself back very nicely, and I am again skipping details because I don't remember all the details, but a lot of those details are both important and not important enough to bring up. Because, well, you said it yourself, you're not going to watch something if I sit there and explain everything to you anyway.
Yeah.
So this is a good way for you to also really see this episode and be like, oh, I see what he means. It's a better episode than it gets credit for.
Okay.
It really is. And that's why it's on my list. It's not like a wow episode. It's actually a fairly subdued story, all things considered. But it's a well-told subdued story. It uses its subdued nature to its advantage as opposed to tearing itself apart.
Okay. When you guys was? I don't see it.
Right here.
Oh, 5. Okay.
Season 1, episode 5.
Okay.
I know. I have terrible handwriting. There's a reason I have the Tale of the Lonely Ghost on here. Okay, so this is one where a girl goes to visit her cousin. Her cousin's a real bitch. Let's just get that out of the way. Her cousin's a bitch.
Okay.
We're not keeping this PG. This is PG-13. The girl's a bitch. And next to them is a house that her aunt, who is a real estate agent, has been trying to get sold for a while. And their nanny was the mother of this ghost. And the ghost, she was deaf. She was sick or something like that. She was deaf. She was mute. She couldn't talk or anything like that. So when the girl is dared by her cousin to go into the house for the night as like an initiation thing in order to hang out with her friends. Mind you, she's a bitch.
I ain't going to no haunted house to hang out with you. Fuck you and your friends.
Basically. She runs into this ghost who's just wanting help. And it scares her half to death. She runs out. Then, as punishment, she and her cousin are forced to go and clean this house. They wind up back in that room, but where there was a single writing of help backwards on the wall the first time, now there's just help scrawled on every wall. And it scares them that much more. Come to find out, after the ghost finally gets their attention long enough to just be like, all I want is for your help with this. She's got a locket of her and her mother. She realizes that it's the nanny. She grabs the nanny before the nanny leaves. And mind you, the nanny's being basically forced out by the hateful cousin and the mom, who's just a pushover, giving her too much leeway, which is why she's such a hateful little bitch. And she pulls the nanny back in there. The nanny's fighting against it because she doesn't want to. Finally sees her daughter. And then the little girl just invites her into the mirror in the bedroom, which is a detail I skipped over. But again, that's Both important and not at the same time.
Yeah.
It's something you need to see for yourself.
Okay.
She goes into this mirror world and they're happily together. It ends on such a
she dies?
Technically, yes, the mother more or less dies, but she reverts back to her younger self. Like this happened many, many decades ago at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And they live in this mirror world happily ever after the end. Like it's a beautiful, happy little end to the story.
Okay, I know you skipped over a lot. How did the girl die?
I don't remember is the problem. I want to say the girl died in part because she couldn't be heard. Like she was locked in the room unintentionally. Like she accidentally got locked in that room.
Okay.
And because she couldn't talk, she couldn't vocalize in any way. Her mother never heard her, thought she had either run off or been kidnapped or something like that. Didn't ever find her in the house, then left that house grieving. I know it's kind of weak in the regard of explaining that part of it a little bit.
Yeah, because it makes zero sense. Okay, deaf, mute, whatever the case may be. She's locked in the room.
Yeah.
Cool, whatever.
Like she gets herself locked in the room.
Yeah.
Somehow. Like she was not forcibly locked into the room. Let's get that out of the way. She was not forcibly locked.
I wasn't thinking that.
Someone will.
Yeah, true. Mom can't find her.
Mom can't find her.
She thinks she's ran off.
Yep.
You didn't open every single door in your house, but then you finally open that door and she's not there. So the mirror was enchanted or something, kind of like the mirror of Erised or the void that's in Harry Potter when Sirius popped his ass in there and he died. Is it something like that? Because how is it that you as a mother open every single door in your house and don't see your kid? But that mirror there, which is the passageway from back and forth for this little girl to come out and be talking about help and then pull her mother in there. My thought process is that mirror was in there, that mirror was haunted.
I think the mirror was a portal of some kind.
Yeah, and the little girl wandered in it. Because that's the only explanation.
Which is probably what did happen. And again, I'm just missing details.
That's the only explanation for the mom not finding her. Because you're trying to tell me you just thought she ran away. You didn't open every single door in your house first before you jumped to that conclusion. That's just my opinion.
Well, again, I'm not really giving great details on this. I'm
saying it in a way to get you to watch it.
Yeah, I'm skipping over some details here. And because this happened decades in the past, mind you, this was probably at least 20, 30 years prior.
Mm.
I think they actually do list it as 20 or 30 years prior. Different thought process in the different time period, maybe. Like 1950. We don't know what was happening. This is a Canadian series, so we don't know what's going on in 1950s Canada. Although it was filmed in both America and Canada. So it was back and forth. So it's both Canadian and Canadian-American series. So we don't know what was going on up there in the north. For all we know, she could have died because of snow.
Yeah, windows open or something. But that's my theory. I'm sticking to it. So watch it and find out and tell me if it's not.
Well, it's a better episode than I'm giving it credit for. Like, it's a better episode than I'm really giving detail on. Let's just put it that way. Phenomenal episode. A must watch. It really is a must watch. Because it's another one of those ones where it's got a beautiful little happy ending to it. And it's told really well. And this was just episode 3, mind you. It's a stronger episode than I'm explaining it.
Okay. Because why was the nanny fired? Because, I mean, she just died. So it's not like she had anything else going for her. So... she chose to leave of her own volition because she overheard the girl and her mother being like, why is she still here? Yada, yada. She has nowhere else to go. I wish she did, but she doesn't. So they were both being hateful. The mother and the cousin daughter. Okay. That's what I was saying. I was like, there had to been another... Now... Back up again. Now, why is this other girl there? Was she just there for like the summer?
She was there for the summer.
Okay.
Because her parents are scientists and they had to go off to another country to go do some archaeological something or other.
Okay. That's the only gap. I'm pretty sure you said it, but I just...
No, actually, I didn't.
Okay.
I didn't. Yeah, she's there visiting for the summer because her parents are off doing a thing and she couldn't go with them.
Okay.
So she's there for the summer and that leads from one thing to the next. And so forth and so on.
And she's stuck with these horrible people.
Well, by the end of it, because the cousin had gotten so scared having been dragged into the mirror herself, when the whole ghost thing is concluded, she's released from the mirror but is now stuck in the closet. And her friends and her cousin show up there at the door, and her cousin, the nice one that came to visit, is like, are you going to stop treating your friends poorly? Are you going to stop being such a hateful person? This, that, and the other. And then finally lets her out of the closet, which, mind you, at the time, because she had gone into the mirror of her own volition, have been tricked by all the stuffed animals sitting on the bed in this beautiful, very girly room that was even more girly than her girly room. And mind you, she's a self-centered, selfish, greedy, materialistic
So was she trying
person.
to steal something from the room?
She was just attracted by it. I guess she was going to go in there to try to grab some of the stuff and then walk back out, but then she couldn't get out.
Oh, okay. So she was lured in by her own greed.
She was lured in by her own greed. And then because there was someone else there in the mirror now, then the ghost girl was actually able to leave the mirror and come out, which is why the first help was mirrored, because she was stuck in the mirror.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So, again, I didn't explain it well. The episode is far better than I'm explaining it, and I highly recommend it. It's a must watch.